Tonight, before your eyes grow heavy and the day finally releases its grip on your shoulders, imagine yourself standing at the very beginning of the Oregon Trail, where the last wooden buildings of Independence, Missouri, fade slowly behind you and the land ahead stretches so wide and quiet that it feels almost unreal, as if the world itself is holding its breath, waiting to see whether you will dare to cross it. Let your body soften for a moment. Let your jaw unclench. Let the weight of the modern day slip away. Because out here there are no walls, no locked doors, no streetlights humming in the distance. Only open ground, creaking wagons, tired animals, and the deep, ancient darkness that settles in once the sun sinks below the horizon. If you were truly here, standing in worn boots beside a wagon carved with dust and hope, you would already understand a difficult truth that early settlers learned very quickly. Surviving the day was only half the challenge, because surviving the night required an entirely different kind of courage. Before we move any farther down the trail, take a moment to settle in, and if you genuinely enjoy these quiet journeys through history, you can like the video and subscribe. And if you feel like it, tell me where you are listening from, and what time it is for you right now, because nights feel different depending on where you are in the world. Now dim the lights around you, let the room grow still, and step with me into the evening of the Oregon Trail. The sun slips away faster than you expect, as if it is eager to leave this land to its nocturnal rulers. And suddenly the trail that felt vast and open during the day begins to shrink, not physically but emotionally, as shadows stretch long across the rutted ground, and the familiar shapes of wagons and oxen take on softer, heavier outlines. Dust hangs in the cooling air, stirred by the last movements of the day, and you can hear it in the way boots scuff softly, in the low grunt of oxen settling into place, in the faint creak of wooden wheels that will not fully rest until morning. Early settlers noticed this change immediately, this moment when the land shifted its tone, because night on the Oregon Trail was not simply the absence of daylight, it was a transformation, one that sharpened every sound and magnified every worry, making even the smallest decision feel important. You move closer to the forming camp, drawn instinctively toward the glow of the first small fires, because humans have always gathered around warmth and light when darkness grows too large, and even those who tried to act brave felt their shoulders relax slightly when the flames began to dance. A fact that surprises many people today is that wagon parties stopped early, often hours before true darkness, not out of laziness, but because daylight was precious and night demanded preparation, meaning evenings were long, deliberate, and filled with quiet rituals designed to make sleep possible in a place where sleep never came easily. As the last wagons roll into position, you watch animals shake off the dust of the trail, their breath rising in pale clouds, and somewhere nearby a baby begins to cry, quickly soothed by a familiar voice, the sound blending gently with the distant call of an owl, creating a strange harmony that feels both fragile and comforting. You find yourself wondering, not for the first time, how anyone could truly rest out here, exposed beneath a sky so vast it feels endless, with no solid walls, no locks, and no certainty that morning will arrive without trouble. That question haunted early settlers every single night. Many of them came from towns or farms where neighbors lived close enough to shout for help, but on the trail the nearest friendly voice might be several hundred yards away, and in darkness that distance felt immeasurable. As you kneel to check your pack, brushing dust from the fabric, you notice how dry the ground is, how easily it crumbles beneath your fingers, and you remember reading that some settlers believed rubbing dust on their skin at night could mask human scent from predators, a practice historians still debate, not because it was necessarily effective, but because it reveals just how deeply fear and imagination shaped nighttime survival. The sky deepens from blue to purple, then into a soft velvet black, and stars appear slowly at first, then all at once scattered so thickly above you that it feels as though you could fall upward into them if you leaned back too far. A dog trots past, nose low, pausing to sniff the air, and you realize how important these animals were on the trail, not just as companions but as living alarm systems, capable of sensing movement long before humans ever could. Lantern light wobbles across tired faces as people drift toward the center of camp, exhaustion written into every movement, yet softened by relief because the day is finally done. And for now, that is enough. Some families unroll their bedding near their wagons, others choose spots slightly farther away, each decision shaped by instinct, habit, and stories heard from those who traveled before them, because there was no single correct way to sleep safely on the Oregon Trail, only methods that felt right enough to quiet the mind. You listen as someone mentions the chance of rain, and you tilt your head back to study the clouds, thin and stretched across the sky, not threatening tonight, but always worth watching, because weather out here could turn without warning. As you settle near a small fire, its warmth brushing against your knees, you hear quiet conversation, the stirring of a pot, the gentle pop and crackle of burning wood, and you understand that this shared space, this fragile circle of light, is not just about heat or food, but about reminding everyone that they are not alone. Early settlers often said that sleep came easier when the camp felt united, even loosely, because isolation was one of the most dangerous enemies of the trail. Eventually you rise and move away from the fire, searching for a place to rest, choosing ground that feels slightly higher, firm beneath your boots, close enough to the wagons to feel connected, but far enough to escape the constant creak of cooling wood. As you spread your blanket and lie back, the darkness presses in gently, not hostile, but heavy, like a thick curtain drawn across the world. And in that quiet, you begin to understand something the settlers learned night after night. Sleep on the Oregon Trail was never guaranteed, never deep, never careless. But it was possible when fear was balanced with routine, when vigilance softened into trust, and when the land, just for a few hours, agreed to let you rest. And this is only the beginning. You wake again a little earlier than you expect. Though no one calls your name, it's the air that stirs you, the faint shift in its temperature, the subtle rhythm of the camp beginning to breathe awake before dawn, the way the prairie itself seems to stretch and sigh in the half-dark. People are moving softly, their voices low, kettles clinking, animals snorting as they sense the start of another day. But tonight, as dusk settles once more, and the land exhales into silence, you are learning what it truly meant for early settlers to choose their ground and make themselves safe for sleep. Evening returns like a familiar companion, slowly, patiently brushing the trail in gold before pulling it gently into shadow. You stretch your shoulders, the ache of travel spreading through your arms, and follow the quiet procession of figures drifting outward to scan the landscape. Everyone knows that where you sleep decides more than comfort. It decides whether you rest in peace or lie awake listening for danger. The group moves methodically, spreading across the open plain in search of high ground, dry earth, and clear sightlines. You crouch to test the soil, rubbing it between your fingers, feeling how loose or damp it is. A few steps away, someone mutters that water is near, and you can hear it too, a thin whisper of a stream hidden beyond the ridge, too close to camp near water, and you invite the night's creatures too far, and you wake exhausted, burdened by the weight of buckets come morning. It's a delicate compromise, one that settlers repeated hundreds of times across hundreds of miles. Travelers' diaries speak of this nightly ritual as both science and superstition. Some watched their oxen for signs. If the beasts stood restless or sniffed into the wind, it meant a storm might be brewing. Others listened for frogs, believing their croaks revealed hidden marshes. Whether those beliefs were right or not hardly mattered. On the trail, knowledge came from feeling, not certainty. You kneel to inspect a slight hollow in the earth, the way it dips just enough to gather rain if the sky decides to turn. You imagine waking to water creeping beneath your blanket, and you move on, climbing the smallest rise to safer ground. A few others follow, scanning for holes or animal burrows that could twist an ankle or lure predators close. Every step is a small negotiation with the land. Every choice shapes the next few hours of safety. When the camp leader finally calls out that this patch will do, Relief spreads like warmth. You can feel it settle into people's bodies, the gentle release of tension, the way shoulders drop, the way laughter begins to float again. Someone marks the perimeter with lanterns, setting them just far enough apart that their circles of light barely touch, leaving soft darkness between. It's not meant to scare away danger. It's meant to teach the eyes where home ends and wilderness begins. The wagons begin to move, their wooden wheels groaning in unison as they arc slowly into a loose ring. You watch from the side, hands resting on your knees, as each driver angles his wagon toward the center, aligning it with quiet precision. There's something almost sacred in the motion, as though each turning wheel reaffirms a collective faith that safety can be built out of wood and willpower. One woman guides her oxen gently, whispering encouragement. Dust swirls around her feet like smoke. A man shouts playful instructions. Another steadies a wheel. A child runs to fetch a missing pin. It's chaotic and calm all at once, a kind of frontier choreography performed nightly under an indifferent sky. You step forward to help push a tailboard into place, feeling the rough texture of wood against your palms. The heat of the day still clings to it, a faint ghost of sunlight. You catch the smell of resin and earth, sharp, honest, grounding. Slowly the circle tightens. Wagons settle into their positions with heavy thuds, their shapes forming a fragile wall between what's known and what waits beyond. Lanterns flicker along the outer edges, glowing like small earthbound stars. Shadows weave between them as people move about, tending to their tasks, tying ropes, gathering kindling. Inside the circle, the air feels different, thicker somehow, as if the boundary itself holds warmth. You understand now what settlers meant when they wrote that a wagon ring wasn't just a defense. It was a declaration. It said, "We belong here, if only for the night." Children chase one another in short bursts before being pulled back toward the fire. A mother hums softly as she spreads blankets, her tune winding between the wagon spokes like a ribbon of calm. Someone tells a quiet joke, laughter rising and fading quickly into the dusk. And you realize that these small human sounds, voices, clinking pots, the distant murmur of animals were the real music of safety. They filled the night so the mind didn't have to. You walk the inside of the ring once more, fingertips brushing the sides of wagons. Each one bears its own story, names painted in careful letters, scratches from long miles, small handprints pressed into the dust. One simply says hope. Another bears the faint outline of a red flower drawn by a child's hand. These marks feel like prayers. You return to your place near the fire as darkness deepens. The sky above is ink black, alive with stars. The circle holds steady, and as the night grows colder, you understand why settlers called this ritual circling in. It was more than strategy. It was comfort shaped into a physical form. A reminder that even in a world so wide and wild, people could build a small island of light and rest with nothing but trust, wood, and fire. The prairie wind sighs low across the grass. The lanterns flicker, the laughter fades into whispers. The circle stands complete, and within its imperfect boundary, the long night begins once again. You notice the fire builders starting their quiet work again, crouched near the center of the wagon ring, their silhouettes trembling in the lantern light as though they are moving underwater. The air has grown cooler now, brushing across your cheeks like a sigh drawn straight from the prairie. A few sparks flick from flint and steel, sharp silvery notes breaking the silence, then vanish before they can be born into flame. You walk closer, drawn by that simple ritual of light, meeting dark. For settlers, the fire was more than heat. It was identity, a living thing that reminded them, even for a few hours, that they were still human and still here. You kneel beside one of the men arranging the tinder bundle. He breathes on it gently, coaxes it with patience born of repetition. It catches at last, curling upward in a fragile golden thread before it grows strong enough to stand on its own. The smell of smoke rises at once, pure and earthy. Someone feeds in thin twigs. Someone else adds thicker sticks, and soon the first fire of the evening hums steadily, licking its way into the darkness. It flickers over faces, showing the deep lines of exhaustion softened by relief. All across the ring, more fires come alive, one, then another, until the whole camp is a constellation of trembling orange stars spread across the grass. Each is perfectly placed, never too close to a wagon wheel, never without a small ring of cleared earth around it. You can see the care in every circle scraped clean of grass, in every stone boundary arranged to contain the heat. They have done this so many times that their movements look rehearsed, though it is only necessity that has made them graceful. The flames paint long shadows that move like silent dancers against the wagon sides. You step back to take it in. The light doesn't fully erase the dark, it only carves out a soft space within it. Settlers understood this balance instinctively. Too much fire invited attention from miles away, too little left them blind to what prowled just beyond the glow, so they measured the light, like they measured water or grain, letting it spill only as far as safety required. A woman tosses a handful of dried sage into one of the fires. It flares briefly, releasing a scent that cuts through the cold. She tells the others that her mother used to burn sage back east to drive away biting insects, and though nobody knows if it truly works, everyone leans a little closer to the smoke anyway. Tradition and belief walk hand in hand out here. Both help people sleep. Another fire nearby burns lower, smaller, watched over by a family with children. The father explains softly that he keeps it dim because his youngest wakes frightened when the flames jump too high. The flicker of light unsettles her dreams. He prefers a steady glow, low enough that the shadows move slowly. You glance toward the child and see her clutching a small blanket, eyes fixed on the gentle rhythm of firelight. It feels peaceful, almost holy. Your hands stretch toward the nearest flame. The warmth climbs into your skin, softening the ache from travel, reminding you of how human warmth once meant survival. You can almost feel how settlers must have longed for this moment after every endless mile, the moment when they could sit still and let the day dissolve. They stir pots suspended on makeshift tripods, tin spoons clinking against metal, the air filling with the smell of beans, bacon, and wood smoke. Someone laughs quietly, at a story told half under their breath. Others join in with small chuckles, the kind that spill out before people realize they've forgotten to be tired. You tilt your head back to watch the smoke drift upward. It doesn't rise in straight lines, it curls and folds as if it too is searching for a place to rest. You think of accounts written by travelers who said that smoke from a healthy campfire looked like prayer. It rose evenly and refused to scatter. Bad weather, they claimed, could be predicted when smoke hugged the ground or spun erratically. Wind changes direction slightly, and you can see a man adjusting the fire's position, shielding the flames with a flat board to keep sparks from leaping toward the wagons. He mutters to himself that prairie wind will trick you every time. It's a voice that carries experience rather than frustration. These small corrections are the quiet labor of safety, the kind that leaves no trace but saves lives all the same. The fires form their geometry now, small suns overlapping but never merging entirely. Between them, the darkness lingers in thin rivers, soft places where eyes can rest. You notice that the spacing of the fires seems deliberate, as if the camp breathes through these pools of light. And maybe it does. Each flame defines a heartbeat of the community, the distance between them like the pause between breaths. As the fires mature, the chatter softens. People begin to drift into smaller circles, their faces lit from below in the amber glow. Children lean against parents, the day's dust still streaked across their cheeks. Old stories surface, half memories, half imagination, tales of towns left behind, of dreams waiting at the far end of the trail. You crouch again, poking lightly at the coals, listening to their faint hiss. It sounds like rain on dry leaves, soothing and steady. In a few minutes, someone will bank the fire, heap the coals, cover them slightly, and let them glow through the night without burning wild. Every flame must be tamed before sleep. The woman with the sage is humming now, low and steady, a tune that has no words. Her song mingles with the crackle of fire and the rustling of grass. Beyond the circle, the dark presses close again, thick and unknowable. But inside this fragile constellation of warmth and breath, you feel something like peace. You sit back on your heels and breathe deeply. The scent of smoke, dust, and faint pork fat wraps around you like a blanket. The prairie wind moves gently through the circle, tugging at wagon covers, stroking the flames without putting them out. The light shivers but holds, and as you watch those small fires sway together, each one tended by a weary, hopeful hand, you begin to understand why settlers called them the heart of camp. For even in the loneliest stretch of the journey, a little fire meant that life was still winning, that warmth still existed, and that the night, for all its vastness, had finally been taught to listen. The flames lower, glowing softer now. Shadows deepen. The prairie begins to hum again with its quiet, endless song. You pull your blanket closer and feel your heartbeat settle into the rhythm of the coals. The fires flicker on, their light gentle as breath, and for the first time in a long while, the night feels almost kind. You rise from the fire slowly, the heat still clinging to your legs, and glance toward the outer edge of the circle where shadows fold into the quiet. The night has grown thick and cool, the kind that seems to seep beneath clothing and into bone. Around you, families begin their last ritual of the evening, building small islands of comfort out of dirt, blankets, and hope. There is something deeply human about the way they move now. The day's chatter has vanished. Even the laughter has quieted into murmurs. The clatter of spoons and wagon chains has softened into the rustle of fabric, the gentle scrape of hands smoothing the ground. This, you realize, is the true heart of night on the trail. Not the danger, not the darkness, but the fragile intimacy of people preparing to sleep under an endless sky. You kneel beside your own wagon, brush your hand over the soil, and feel the temperature of the earth cool, uneven, but dry. It's the kind of ground that will hold shape when pressed. You remember reading that settlers learned to mold the land to their bodies before laying out blankets. They would smooth it with their palms, carve shallow hollows for hips and shoulders, remove rocks that would dig into skin long before morning. Those who slept well, they said, were those who listened to the ground first. You spread your blanket carefully. It smells of smoke and sweat, of days folded into nights and back again. The fabric is rough against your fingertips, but its weight is comforting. It feels like continuity. You shake it once, sending a thin cloud of dust into the air, and lay it flat. Beside you, a man adjusts his bedding under the wagon, ducking low into the half-dark space to escape the wind. Another prefers the open air, claiming he sleeps better with the stars above him. Everyone has their own method, and each one carries a small superstition. A woman a few yards away places a handful of dry grass beneath her blankets, layering it for softness. She tells her son that buffalo grass makes the best mattress because it smells like home. He laughs, skeptical, but helps her gather more anyway. Travelers' journals mention this little trick often. How dry prairie grass, sage, or even handfuls of straw were pressed beneath blankets to create insulation. It wasn't comfort as we know it, but it was a kindness, a quiet offering to weary bodies. You roll up your coat and tuck it beneath your head. Pillows were a luxury few could afford, but coats, flour sacks, even bundled shoes filled the gap. You test it, shifting your neck, finding the angle where the day's ache begins to ease. The ground feels firm beneath you the way a patient teacher feels firm, a little unforgiving but honest. Nearby, a mother hums softly as she tucks her children under a single quilt. The melody drifts like smoke, wrapping the camp in a gentle rhythm. One of the children giggles, another murmurs for water, and then silence returns, deep and steady. You can almost see the warmth in the small heap of their bodies beneath the blanket, the way family became the only wall worth building out here. You lie back, resting your head on the coat, and gaze upward. The stars shimmer cold and bright, scattered like grain across an invisible table. The Milky Way stretches over you like a pale road, Another trail crossing this one, endless and ancient. You breathe in and taste the faint mineral scent of dust and smoke and wool. Somewhere, a kettle lid rattles as it cools. A horse stamps a hoof. The prairie breathes. A woman's voice drifts across the camp, saying she once heard of settlers who warmed stones by the fire and wrapped them in cloth to tuck under their blankets. Another man chuckles that his family tried it once. The stones scorched holes straight through the bedding. Still they laugh, because even misfortune becomes a kind of warmth when shared at the end of a long day. You shift your legs, pressing your heels into the packed soil. The cold seeps upward through the blanket. But it is a familiar cold, the kind that reminds you you're alive. You pull the edge of the blanket over your chest, cocooning yourself against the chill. Your body settles inch by inch, matching the contour of the earth, aligning with its quiet pulse. Farther away, a few travelers whisper softly to each other, their voices fading into the rhythm of the wind. Someone sighs, someone prays. The fires dim into orange embers, breathing slow and shallow. You watch them through half-closed eyes, those tiny glowing hearts still holding the night together. And for a long, still moment you sense what the settlers must have felt every evening on the trail, that strange peace that comes after exhaustion, when fear has burned itself out and all that remains is the steady weight of survival. The ground beneath you hums softly, as if the land itself is whispering its approval. You exhale long and slow and let yourself drift. The night folds over the camp like a great, patient hand. The stars hang suspended, silent witnesses to human fragility and endurance alike. Somewhere in the distance, a lone coyote calls, a sound that feels less like danger and more like a lullaby sung from the far edge of the world. You close your eyes, the earth cool and familiar beneath you, the last warmth of the fires fading into your skin. Around you, an entire camp exhales as one, the breath of dozens of travelers merging with the soft sigh of the prairie. And as you sink deeper into the slow rhythm of the land, you understand that safety on the Oregon Trail was never guaranteed, but sleep, when it came, was sacred, a small victory. You settle deeper beneath the blanket, your body molding slowly to the shape of the earth until you can feel its quiet pulse beneath your ribs. The fire's glow has dwindled to soft embers, and what remains of the light flickers faintly across wagon wheels and sleeping faces. The night is fully here now, vast, black and immense, but it is not empty. It breathes. At first you think you hear silence. Then, like a curtain lifting, the sounds begin to reveal themselves. The prairie hums in layers, low, steady, alive. Crickets chirp in even rhythm, their tiny orchestra keeping time with the whispering wind. Grasshoppers click and rasp invisibly in the dark, and somewhere beyond the wagons, a horse exhales, a long warm breath that curls into the cool air. You listen, motionless, learning the music of the night the way the settlers once did. For them, sound was everything. Out here, in this open and unfamiliar world, their ears replaced the walls they no longer had. Each creak, each sigh, each rustle meant something. A sleeping ox shifting its weight, a rope straining against its stake, the faint trickle of water where the river bends just beyond the rise. It's impossible not to listen, because the prairie refuses to let anyone forget that they are guests upon its floor. You breathe slowly, deeply, matching the rhythm of the night. Somewhere close by, a child murmurs in sleep, their mother answering with a soft shushing sound that blends perfectly into the wind. It's strange how human voices, when lowered to whispers, seem to belong to the earth itself. Then crack, a sharp, dry sound like a twig snapping beneath weight. Your body stiffens. For a heartbeat you hear nothing else. Your mind sketches possibilities faster than reason can follow. A wolf, a prowler, the unthinkable. You hold your breath and wait. Another sound follows, a slow rustle, a snort, the soft thud of hooves. You exhale in relief. It's only one of the oxen shifting near the rope line, irritated by an insect. You almost smile at yourself, realizing that imagination can move faster than any predator. Early settlers wrote often about that exact fear, that trick of the dark when the unknown grows teeth. You roll gently to your side, your ear brushing the blanket, and the ground sends back its own messages, tiny tremors of movement, a muffled vibration that might be the distant herds grazing under moonlight. You remember reading how travelers sometimes woke to the sound of buffalo moving miles away, the ground trembling faintly as if the world had begun to breathe differently. Tonight, the air feels thick with that same ancient energy, wild, steady, eternal. A sudden flutter near your head makes you flinch. Wings quick and small, a night bird lifts off, vanishing upward into darkness. You watch its shape disappear and feel a strange gratitude for its presence. Birds were considered omens by some travelers. If they flew late and called often, the night would be calm. If they fell silent, it meant trouble was near. You wait, listening. The air remains filled with their soft, scattered calls. Peaceful then. You can almost imagine the settlers lying here, training themselves to hear in layers. First the wagons, then the people, then the animals, then the prairie, and beyond that silence itself, the deepest sound of all. A man's cough ripples once through the camp. A horse stamps. The rhythm resumes. The wind changes. You feel it move over your skin like a cool hand. It smells faintly of sage and wet earth. The stars above blink clearer. The Milky Way so bright it looks close enough to touch. For a moment, the darkness feels less like a threat and more like a body wrapping itself around you, a blanket made of distance and time. You think of how settlers must have lived with this constant awareness, that even when they closed their eyes, they were never alone. They slept inside a living world, one that shifted and spoke and breathed with them. They learned to listen not for danger, but for familiarity, the comforting creak of the wagons, the dog's low growl at the wind, the tiny hiss of fire dying into ash. Those sounds meant that life still moved, still continued, even while they rested. Another crack echoes, this one lighter, followed by a small clink of metal. You lift your head slightly. It's only a lantern chain brushing against the wagon wheel in the wind. The realization makes you smile. How even the smallest details become guardians of peace once they're understood. Fear, it seems, is just mystery without explanation. A cricket lands on your blanket. Its chirp is so close that you feel the vibration through the fabric before it hops away, lost again among thousands of others. You close your eyes. The chorus continues, steady, constant, ancient. You wonder if the settlers ever noticed how the prairie seems to sing them to sleep. Your breathing slows until it matches the rhythm of those unseen lives around you. The camp itself hums, a living creature made of wood, fabric, fire, and breath. Beyond the wagons, a coyote howls, its voice thin and mournful. Another answers from farther away, and then a third, their cries weaving through the air like a song older than memory. Once, long ago, a traveler wrote that coyotes sounded like ghosts arguing with heaven. You understand what he meant. Their voices are lonely, but not cruel. They remind you that everything alive out here is simply trying to be heard. You shift once more, the ground sighing beneath you, your blanket warm where it touches your chest and cold where it slips away. The noises of the prairie wash over you again. Wind in the grass, insects pulsing in time, animals breathing softly, the fire's last whispering crackles. This is what safety sounded like on the Oregon Trail. Not silence, not certainty, just the fragile chorus of the living world agreeing, for one small night, to let weary travelers rest. You close your eyes, your heartbeat sinking into the same slow rhythm as the land's. The prairie hums, the stars blur, and thought dissolves into the long, gentle current of sleep. You drift half awake, half dreaming, to the sound of soft whimpers carried on the wind, small, uneven breaths that catch in a child's throat. The noise is fragile, barely louder than the rustle of grass, but it draws you gently back from sleep. You open your eyes, and the camp reappears in silvered shapes, wagons glimmering faintly in moonlight, blankets rising and falling with the rhythm of quiet breathing, and near one wheel, the outline of a woman rocking slowly, her shawl wrapped around something small and trembling in her arms. The child's cry wavers again, then dissolves into hiccuping sobs. The mother hums softly, her voice carrying only a few notes, low, steady, like the rolling of a far-off river. She whispers to the little one about stars and angels, and the promise of morning. You can almost hear the words even though the wind swallows them before they reach you. Her movement is rhythmic, timeless, the same slow rocking gesture that has comforted frightened children across every century. You push yourself up slightly on your elbows, not to intrude but simply to watch. The small bundle shifts, a faint glint of tear on a cheek catching the moonlight. You think about how enormous this prairie must feel to a child. The darkness without end, the strange animal sounds, the cold air creeping across their blankets. Many of the settlers' journals mention nights like this, when children could not sleep for fear that the stars themselves might fall, or that the wagons might roll away and leave them behind. A second mother, a few yards away, kneels to tuck her own children more tightly under a quilt. She pulls the fabric high, murmuring that the blanket keeps the night out. The little ones squirm, half asleep, one mumbling a dream about wolves, another clutching at her mother's hand until the fear passes. The woman stays there a while, her palm resting against her child's back, tracing small circles until the breathing steadies again. It's quiet after that. The air smells faintly of milk and wood smoke, of wool and dust. You notice now how many of the children sleep in small clusters, siblings or cousins pressed together under one covering, bodies sharing heat, their heads resting on one another's arms. They look like a single organism, a knot of warmth against the vastness. Diaries often spoke of this closeness, of how children found safety not from distance or weapons but from contact, skin to skin, heartbeat to heartbeat. A father nearby whispers a story, his voice rough but tender. You can't make out all the words, but there's mention of a bear who tried to steal the moon, of a fox who tricked him and lit the stars instead. The children giggle softly, and the sound is like the crackle of the smallest ember. Frontier nights were filled with such stories, part truth, part imagination, woven to distract little hearts from the cold. There were no books, no lanterns bright enough for reading, so parents became storytellers, crafting lullabies out of whatever scraps of memory they carried from home. One girl near the edge of the circle clutches a doll made from cloth and buttons, its fabric stained by miles of travel. She whispers something to it, then tucks it under her chin before closing her eyes. In some accounts, these dolls were treated almost as companions of faith, kept close during storms, buried in hands during fever. They were the smallest thread connecting childhood to home, carried through mud and snow and fear. The camp breathes quietly now. The children's cries have turned to small sighs. A mother still hums, her voice little more than a vibration in the dark. The lullaby moves through the camp like smoke, threading from wagon to wagon. You realize it's not one song but many different tunes, different words, all rising and fading in harmony. Some sound like prayers, others like promises, and somehow, though no one planned it, they blend together, creating the softest choir imaginable. A gust of wind sweeps across the ring, lifting loose hair and blankets. The children stir but do not wake. A woman near you adjusts a corner of fabric to shield her baby from the draft. Her husband sits beside her, staring out into the dark, rifle across his lap, but his face is gentle, distant, listening. The firelight catches the edge of his eyes. He is not guarding against beasts right now, but against the loneliness that waits just beyond the circle's edge. A sudden rustle makes him turn. A stray dog trots between wagons, tail low, sniffing at scraps. The animal pauses beside the sleeping children, then curls into a ball near their feet. No one shoos it away. Even a dog's presence feels like safety out here. You lie back again, your blanket heavy, your heart full. The lullabies continue, the kind that have no beginning or end, only the steady rhythm of breath and warmth and whispered faith. And as you listen to the families around you, those small, fragile constellations of love flickering under an endless sky, you begin to understand that the settlers didn't simply survive the trail through strength or endurance. They survived because they learned how to keep each other human in a place that might otherwise have forgotten what humanity sounded like. The camp is still now. A child whimpers once more, then sighs into sleep. Somewhere, a mother finishes her song and lets silence take it. The night folds back over them all, like a dark, endless quilt. You close your eyes, listening to the echoes of those voices fading softly into the wind. And for a moment it feels as if the prairie itself has become a cradle, vast, watchful, and impossibly tender, rocking every soul gently toward morning. The moon has risen higher now, pale and deliberate, casting its cold light over the camp, like the faint glow of an old lantern. Most of the fires have gone to embers, red hearts pulsing low, but a few still breathe faint smoke into the night. The world has grown quiet, but not still. Somewhere beyond the ring of wagons, the prairie rustles with a slow, ceaseless motion, the sound of the living earth turning in its sleep. A soft crunch of boots on dirt breaks the rhythm. One of the night watchmen passes between the wagons, coat pulled tight against the wind, the barrel of his rifle gleaming dully in the moonlight. His steps are careful but unhurried, his silhouette bending now and then to check a rope, to listen for the faintest shift among the animals. You watch him pause beside an ox, laying a hand against its flank, feeling its warmth beneath the hide, then move on, counting quietly to himself. The settlers knew that night demanded its own kind of labor. Each camp assigned its guards before darkness fell. 2, sometimes 3 men, chosen for their steadiness rather than strength. They would walk the perimeter until the first light of dawn, taking turns to rest. Their minds balanced uneasily between exhaustion and vigilance. Theirs was not a hero's duty, but one of quiet endurance, a service paid to everyone else's sleep. You can hear the faint rhythm of another watchman farther away, humming to himself to stay awake. His song is tuneless but strangely comforting. Every few minutes he taps the butt of his rifle against a wagon wheel, not loud enough to wake anyone, just enough to remind the night that he is listening. The sound carries through the stillness like a heartbeat. Now and then, the wind shifts, bringing with it a new note. The soft jingle of a harness, the sigh of a horse turning in its sleep, the distant cry of a night bird gliding low over the grass. Each sound blends into the other until it's impossible to tell whether the prairie is awake or dreaming. A few dogs remain restless, trotting near in a ring, their noses to the ground. They pause to sniff at wagon wheels, to listen for what no human ear can hear. One stops near your blanket, ears pricked, then relaxes, deciding that all is well. You reach out and brush your fingers through its fur, feeling the warmth of life beneath your hand. The animal gives a low grunt and curls beside you, its body pressed close, sharing its steady breath. The guards exchange quiet words as they pass each other at intervals. Brief murmurs, barely audible, all still as prayer. They smile, weary but content. They have learned the subtle grammar of night. How a distant howl means the coyotes are hunting deer. How a sudden silence might mean a storm is gathering. How even the absence of sound can be a message worth listening to. From your place on the ground, half wrapped in dreams, you watch one of them kneel near a fire, stirring the coals to life with a stick. A faint flare of light brushes his face, a momentary spark of color in a world gone blue and gray. He cups his hands near the glow for warmth, then shades it quickly, careful not to make the camp too bright. Firelight that drew comfort for the sleepers could also draw eyes from the prairie. It was always a balance, enough light to see, but not enough to be seen. He moves on, and the glow fades again. The wind returns, curling gently through the wagons, stirring the canvas covers like a sigh. You can smell faint traces of smoke, leather, and wool. There's a rhythm to it all. The fire's whisper, the wind's soft touch, the footsteps that pass every few minutes like a pendulum keeping time. The moon climbs higher still. Frost begins to form on the wagon rims, a delicate white lace that glitters faintly under its light. A guard pauses to wipe it away from the wheel spokes, though he knows it will return before morning. He glances once toward the horizon, nothing but a sea of grass, silvered by moonlight, and then back at the circle of wagons, that small fragile fortress of light and warmth. Inside, the sleepers dream. You imagine the stories that might fill their minds, homes left behind, rivers yet to cross, faces waiting in Oregon that they've never seen. The night watch carries those dreams like an unspoken duty. His eyes scan the distance not just for danger, but for the promise that everyone inside the ring will wake to another sunrise. Somewhere far off, a coyote howls again, and the dogs lift their heads but do not bark. They know this song well. The wind carries it across the plains, a thin ribbon of sound stretching between wilderness and camp. It fades slowly, gently, swallowed by the vast dark. You lie back once more, your eyelids heavy, listening to the steady cadence of footsteps making their rounds. The guards move like clock hands, marking the slow passage of hours through vigilance and silence. In their care, the camp becomes something fragile but complete, a world contained within the flicker of a few dying embers and the slow sweep of the stars. The night stretches on, deep and endless, but it no longer feels cold. It feels watched, guarded, held. You drift somewhere between waking and dream, the sound of boots on dirt fading softly until even that becomes part of the rhythm of sleep. The night begins to thin, almost imperceptibly at first, a slow bleaching of the darkness that only those awake long enough can truly see. The stars dim one by one, their edges softening, until they no longer pierce the sky but simply rest within it, like embers cooling after a long burn. The air is sharper now, colder, yet strangely cleaner, filled with that delicate clarity that only arrives just before dawn. You open your eyes to the faintest tremor of light trembling across the horizon. It isn't color yet, just the ghost of morning hinting that it's near. Around you, the camp lies silent but for the subtle rustle of movement, the whisper of blankets shifting, the murmur of someone stretching, the soft creak of wagon wood expanding as the frost begins to melt. The watchmen are still at their posts, their figures grey and spectral in the half-light. One stirs the fire back to life, his breath visible in the chill, his hands moving carefully as if performing a sacred rite. Sparks leap upward, orange against the fading stars, and for a moment they look like the sky returning what it borrowed during the night. A low voice calls out quietly, "Morning's near." The words ripple through the camp, not loud but certain, the way the first bird calls before the sun actually rises. You sit up, blanket slipping from your shoulders, and the cold hits instantly, clean and biting. The ground is hard beneath you, dew already gathering where frost had been. You rub your hands together, then lean toward the nearest fire where thin smoke curls lazily upward. Around you, the camp begins to stir like a great slow animal waking from sleep. Someone yawns, another coughs. Children wriggle beneath quilts, peeking out with sleepy eyes, while their parents stretch stiff limbs and pull on boots still damp with dew. The air smells of wood smoke, sweat, and the faint sweetness of coffee brewing over new flames. A dog shakes itself awake, sending droplets of frost scattering from its fur. It trots between wagons, tail wagging, checking on its people as though making sure they're all still there. A man tosses another log into the fire, and the flames answer greedily, licking upward with renewed strength. The light spills over faces, over canvas, over wheels crusted with frozen mud. You can see now what the darkness had hidden, the thin layer of frost silvering every surface, turning even the most ordinary object into something momentarily holy. The prairie stretches endlessly again, pale and hushed beneath the soft grey sky. In the east, the first true blush of dawn begins to show, a fragile streak of rose spreading slowly through the clouds. People speak quietly at first, voices low out of respect for the lingering peace of the night. Someone hums while packing blankets. Another whispers a prayer of thanks that no storm came, no predators wandered close, no illness struck in the dark. The gratitude is silent but real, written in every careful movement. A woman pours steaming water into a tin cup, the smell of chicory and ash rising in small tendrils. Her husband sits beside her, shoulders hunched against the chill, rubbing his palms together before taking the cup. Neither speaks for a long time. They just watch the light grow stronger. Children begin to laugh now, softly at first, then louder. One throws a handful of frost at another, and the sound of their giggling floats above the camp, fragile but full of life. The parents don't scold. They smile, grateful for the noise. Laughter, after all, means safety. You stand and stretch, your muscles stiff but steady, your breath hanging white in the air. The horizon is pink now, then orange, then streaked with gold. The prairie's colors reawaken in slow motion, browns warming into amber, grass bending with dew, smoke curling blue in the rising light. The wagons begin to creak again, wooden voices groaning back into motion. The animals snort and stamp, sensing breakfast and work ahead. A few men load barrels, others check harnesses. Life resumes its rhythm. The world that had seemed frozen in silence an hour ago is now full of small, purposeful sound. You look around the camp and realize that nothing has changed, and yet everything has. The same circle of wagons, the same faces, the same endless land, but the light transforms it all, turning what was fearsome into familiar once more. The night, for all its vastness, has been endured. One of the watchmen passes by, weary but smiling. His eyes are rimmed with fatigue, but his voice carries quiet pride. "Another safe night," he says, mostly to himself. You nod, because that's all that needs to be said. Out here, survival is never taken for granted. It is noticed, counted, and blessed. You take one last deep breath of the cold air before the sun fully breaks. The scent of firewood and damp soil fills your chest. For a moment, you can almost hear the land whispering its slow approval, as if the earth itself has been watching and is content to let this small caravan continue across its back for one more day. And as the first beam of sunlight finally touches the wagons, catching the metal rims and reflecting off the canvas, you understand the quiet triumph of these mornings, the kind that never shouted victory, but carried it gently in the way light returned after darkness. The Oregon Trail wakes. The wagons groan, the voices rise, and another day begins. The sun climbs at last above the horizon, slow and golden, spilling its light over the land like honey poured onto cold stone. The frost melts in silence, leaving behind tiny drops that glisten on wagon wheels, on the blades of grass, on the canvas still damp with night's breath. The prairie, endless and indifferent, stretches out again in every direction, but now it feels less like a threat and more like a companion. It has watched, it has waited, and it has allowed the living to see another dawn. You sit for a moment before packing, your blanket still heavy on your shoulders, watching the camp reassemble itself into motion. The fires hiss as water is poured on their coals, the smoke rising in gentle threads that twist upward and vanish into the warming air. Men tighten ropes, women fold quilts still soft with body heat, children chase the dogs that trot between wagons. The sound of life fills the air again, wood creaking, voices calling, harnesses clinking. It's almost hard to believe that only hours ago, this same place was shrouded in darkness and uncertainty, every sound a question, every shadow a possibility. But the night has passed, and the quiet victory of surviving it lingers like a fragrance no wind can erase. You glance down at the ground where you slept. There's an imprint of your body in the dirt, a faint hollow, already beginning to fade. It reminds you that even here, in a world that feels so permanent, everything is temporary. The settlers knew this better than anyone. Every camp was built to vanish, every fire lit to be extinguished, every night survived only to make way for another. And yet, within that impermanence, there was meaning. There was faith. The act of lying down in a world so vast, so unpredictable, was itself a declaration of courage. To close one's eyes beneath that sky, to trust the darkness to hold you gently until morning, that was the quietest, purest form of belief. You watch a young boy helping his father hitch the oxen. His breath fogs the air as he pulls the rope, small hands fumbling, learning. He looks tired but determined, eyes squinting against the sun. Someday he'll remember this. The smell of smoke on his clothes, the sting of cold on his fingers, the sound of the prairie waking all around him. These mornings will settle in his memory the way dew settles on the grass, lightly, invisibly, but forever. The mother who sang in the night is folding her blanket now. She pauses, glancing once toward the horizon as if offering a silent prayer. Then she climbs onto the wagon seat beside her husband. Their oxen shift. Ready. The circle of wagons loosens, the lines reform. What was once a village becomes a procession again. The first wheel turns, creaking through mud still soft from frost. Another follows, and another, until the sound becomes a rhythm, a heartbeat, a drumbeat, the pulse of 1,000 hopes moving west. The prairie accepts them without protest, without promise. It has done this before and will do it again. You rise and brush the dust from your coat. The fire pit beside you still smoulders faintly, a last whisper of warmth. You scatter its ashes with your boot, leaving nothing but a dark mark on the ground, already drying in the light. The sun climbs higher, shadows shorten. The last wagon crests a small rise, its wheels throwing tiny bursts of light as they catch the sun. Soon the camp is gone, erased as though it had never been, leaving only flattened grass and faint impressions where bodies once rested. You stand there a while longer, letting the silence settle again. There's something holy about it, the way the land absorbs sound, memory, and fear, leaving only stillness behind. It feels like the prairie itself has exhaled content with the bargain struck between humans and the night. As you turn to follow the distant trail, you realize that this journey, this endless cycle of fear, firelight, and dawn, is what bound them together. It wasn't the promise of Oregon or the hope of a new life. It was this, the nightly ritual of trust, the shared faith that sleep could exist even in a place that offered no walls, no certainty, no guarantee of return. You take one last look at the fading line of wagons, the rising sun reflecting off the white canvas like ghosts of sails on a golden sea. And in that quiet you understand the truth the settlers carried all along, that the greatest victory was not reaching the end of the trail, but simply surviving the night. The trail awakens in motion. Wheels bite softly into the thawing earth, leaving behind shallow grooves that glisten where dew once slept. The oxen move with slow patience, steam lifting from their nostrils in faint clouds that melt into the air as quickly as they form. Leather harnesses creak, voices call out in the distance, and the day begins again exactly as it always does, without ceremony, without applause. The prairie stretches open before them, still silvered by morning light. The grasses shimmer in small waves beneath the wind, and the sound they make is unlike anything found in cities or towns, a long whispering sigh that fills the ears without ever quite forming a note. It's the sound of distance itself. You walk alongside the wagons for a while, the cold fading from your fingers, the ache in your back growing softer as your steps find their rhythm. The ruts beneath your boots are filled with memory, thousands of wheels, thousands of feet, all pressing toward the same invisible horizon. You can almost feel the weight of history in the soil, as if every inch of ground still remembers the hands that once smoothed it into a bed the night before. Ahead, a woman rides perched at the front of her wagon, her shawl pulled tight, her eyes narrowed against the morning glare. The sun paints her face in quiet gold, and for a moment you see how young she is, perhaps no more than 20, though the trail has already carved fine lines of resolve around her mouth. Beside her, a man walks with his hat pulled low, every step deliberate. Between them, the air hums with the unspoken understanding of those who have shared too many silent miles together. Behind you, children laugh as they run ahead of the wagons, chasing the shadows of birds that glide low across the ground. Their joy seems impossible here, fragile, defiant, and yet entirely real. Settlers wrote of this too, of how children could always find wonder where adults saw only hardship, a patch of wildflowers, a curious stone, a butterfly resting on the tongue of a wagon wheel. Each discovery was enough to make the day brighter. By noon, the world has changed again. The air grows warmer, the scent of grass thickens, and the sound of insects fills every corner of silence. You can taste dust in the back of your throat, but it's the kind of dust that feels alive, full of sunlight, full of purpose. Someone begins to sing, a tune without words, carried by the wind. It's a habit among travelers, not for performance, but for rhythm. The song keeps the pace, binds the steps together, gives the body something to follow when the mind begins to wander. The melody drifts back along the line of wagons, each voice that joins adding another faint thread until the music becomes too soft to distinguish from the hum of the prairie itself. You find yourself thinking about how time must have felt different here. Days didn't arrive or end, they unfolded, each one blending into the next, until memory became a long, unbroken horizon. The settlers didn't count hours, only distances. The creek by sundown, the ridge before the storm, the valley where the grass grew higher than the wagon wheels. When they stopped again that night, the ritual would repeat. Fire, food, sleep, watch, and dawn. But beneath the sameness was something sacred, something that transformed mere survival into a kind of pilgrimage. A bird circles overhead, casting a brief moving shadow across your path. You look up and follow its flight until it vanishes into the sun. The light is strong now, dazzling. The wagons ahead shimmer, their canvas tops glowing white, and for an instant it looks as if the entire procession is gliding across a sea of light rather than land. You hear a voice call from the front, water. The sound ripples through the camp, quickening every step, and then you see it. A shallow river winding through a band of willow trees, the surface glinting like broken glass. The oxen quicken their pace, heads lowering, the smell of coolness pulling them onward. As the first wagon reaches the bank, the air fills with life again. Shouts, laughter, splashes, buckets hit the surface, boots sink into mud, dogs leap into the shallows, children chase each other through the reeds. The water is brown and cold, but it feels holy, like a reprieve earned through motion and endurance. You kneel to cup some in your hands. It tastes of earth and iron and distance. You splash your face and close your eyes, and for a moment the fatigue slips away. The settlers linger here, grateful for this brief pause in the unending road. Clothes are washed, pots filled, animals watered. Some rest under the wagons, shading their eyes with hats. Others simply sit and watch the current slide past, silent and steady. And as you stand there, the wind cool against your damp skin, you understand the rhythm of their lives. This constant alternation between struggle and grace, hardship and quiet peace. The Oregon Trail was not only a path carved through wilderness, it was a lesson written in dust and dawns, teaching those who followed it how to live and how to rest in a world that never promised either. You look once more toward the horizon. The sun has begun its long descent, the light already turning softer, warmer, the edges of the sky deepening toward gold. Soon they'll form the circle again, soon the fires will return, and the night will begin its slow and familiar song. And as the first wagon creaks back into motion, wheels cutting through the damp earth, you realize that this story, of sleeping safely beneath a sky too vast to understand, never truly ends. It only pauses like breath between steps waiting for the next night to fall. The wind begins to change long before the sky does. It moves differently, steadier, colder, carrying with it the faint metallic scent that every traveler learns to recognize. A storm forming somewhere far beyond sight. You can feel it brushing across your skin, thin at first, then fuller, as if the prairie itself has taken a deep breath. The wagons are already forming a half circle on a rise just above the grasslands. Drivers speak in lower voices now. The oxen huff uneasily, shaking their heads against the gathering static in the air. You glance up. The horizon has darkened, a bruised line stretching from east to west. Clouds slide in slow ranks like ships approaching shore. The camp moves faster than usual. Ropes are tightened. canvas covers lashed down, and loose items hauled inside wagons before the first drop of rain can fall. The rhythm of preparation feels practiced, almost ritualistic. Everyone knows what to do. It is a language learned through repetition, a choreography of survival. A woman beside you pulls her shawl closer, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "If it comes quick, it'll pass quick," she murmurs, though her voice wavers slightly, betraying more hope than certainty. You nod and help her drag a barrel into place against the wind. When the first raindrops come, they are large and scattered, hesitant, almost curious. They strike the earth with dark, spreading circles that vanish as quickly as they appear. Then the sound deepens. Rain becomes a curtain, sweeping sideways in heavy sheets that drum against the canvas. Thunder answers distantly, its roll stretching long and low like the growl of something ancient. You crouch beneath your wagon and pull your blanket tighter. The air smells of wet grass and dust and lightning, that strange sharp scent that hums at the back of your throat. The wind presses at the wagon wheels, testing the wood. Somewhere close, a child cries out and is hushed by a soothing voice. A dog barks once, then curls closer to its owner. There's a peculiar peace that comes with storms like this. Fear mixes with awe until they are indistinguishable. The settlers wrote often of this sensation, the strange calm that settled once the worst of the rain began, when there was nothing left to do but wait. Waiting, after all, was something they had practiced their entire lives. Lightning flickers again, and for an instant the camp is bright as day. You see faces turned upward, eyes wide, mouths open in silent wonder. The light vanishes just as quickly, leaving only ghostly after images. Then, as if cued by the heavens, the thunder arrives, louder, closer, shaking the ground and rattling the metal rings of the harnesses. And yet, no one runs. They've learned that movement brings danger. Instead, they huddle together under the wagons, murmuring short prayers or old hymns, voices rising and falling with the storm. The sound blends with the rain, indistinguishable, a human rhythm inside a natural one. You join them, resting your hand on the damp earth, feeling the vibration of the thunder through your fingertips. The soil is cold and alive beneath you. You close your eyes, and for a moment you can almost believe that the land is breathing along with you, slow, deep, patient. The wind shifts again, softer now. The storm begins to tire of its fury. The rain lightens into a drizzle, the thunder retreating farther away with each breath. You step out from your shelter, blinking at the silver light that follows in its wake. Everything glistens, the wagons, the grass, the faces of the settlers. Steam rises in thin veils from the earth, the scent of renewal mingling with smoke as fires are coaxed back to life. People emerge cautiously, as if waking from a shared dream. Someone laughs. A small sound, but it ripples through the camp. A woman begins to wring out her shawl. A man checks the oxen, who stand steaming and restless but unharmed. The children, fearless as ever, run into the shallow puddles, splashing with delighted shrieks. You lift your eyes to the sky. The clouds have begun to pull apart, revealing a pale moon behind them. It looks worn but kind, like an old friend returning after a long absence. The wind now carries only the gentle hiss of drying grass. You spread your blanket near the dim embers of a rekindled fire. The air is cool and sweet. A few voices hum softly, not songs this time, but something quieter, wordless, the kind of sound that people make when they have survived something that frightened them. You lie back slowly, feeling the dampness of the earth through the fabric beneath you. The world around you still hums faintly with the echo of thunder, but now it feels distant, like a memory fading even as it's being made. The prairie exhales. The stars reappear, scattered and cold, reflected in the tiny pools of rainwater left behind. The fire crackles weakly beside you, its light bending against the wind. And as your eyes grow heavy again, you realize what the settlers must have learned long ago, that peace is not the absence of danger, but the brief, luminous stillness that follows it. The world will always test you, but if you can rest after the storm, you've already won something sacred. You breathe in one last time, slow and deep. The air tastes clean. The camp has gone quiet again. The night holds you patient and vast. And somewhere out there, beyond the dark curve of the land, the trail continues, waiting for morning. Morning arrives not in brilliance, but in a slow shimmer, a tender unfolding of grey and gold through the mist. The prairie lies half drowned in dew, its blades of grass heavy and shining like strings of glass. Every wagon glistens, every rope and wheel rim wearing the thin silver sheen of survival. The storm has passed, but it has left its signature behind, a world washed clean, quieter than before. You sit up slowly, your blanket cool against your shoulders. The air smells of wet earth and wood smoke, the scent of a world reborn overnight. A few embers still breathe faintly in the nearest fire pit, small orange eyes in the pale morning. Someone kneels there, coaxing them back to flame with cupped hands. The smoke rises in slow, deliberate spirals, like prayers ascending. Around the camp, people begin to move again. No one speaks loudly. They move softly, reverently, as though they're afraid to disturb the fragile peace left behind by the storm. A man wipes water from his rifle and sets it against the wagon wheel. A woman shakes out a quilt, its pattern muted by dampness, and drapes it across a sun-warmed barrel. Two children crouch to study a puddle, their reflections rippling as they poke at it with sticks. And you realize that this gentle rhythm after the chaos is the true heartbeat of the trail. Not the miles conquered or the mountains yet to cross, but these fragile mornings when the world feels young again, when life continues simply because people choose to rise and keep going. You stand, stretching stiff limbs, and walk toward the edge of the camp. The grass brushes against your boots, cool and fragrant. The sun, still low, cuts through the mist in long golden bands. It feels warm on your face, and for a moment you just stand there, eyes closed, breathing in the clean air. Behind you, the sound of life grows. Kettles clink, someone laughs softly, an ox snorts, stamping at a puddle. A woman hums a hymn under her breath as she braids her daughter's hair. The trail, ever demanding, begins to call again. A soft breeze moves through the camp, lifting the last traces of smoke, tugging gently at loose fabric. You watch as travelers begin packing their things with slow, practiced motions. Blankets folded, harnesses buckled, ropes coiled neatly by tired but steady hands. The storm has not broken them. It has reminded them who they are, people who endure, who adapt, who rest only long enough to begin again. You walk past the last wagon and look back once more. The circle that protected them through the night is now unwinding, its symmetry dissolving into motion. The fire pits will soon be cold, the footprints fading, the ground returning to silence. Nothing here will remain, except the faint scent of smoke carried eastward on the wind. You reach down and brush your fingertips through the wet grass. Tiny droplets cling to your skin, each one catching a glint of sunlight before slipping away. The land is alive again, and so are you. And as the wagons begin to roll forward, wheels cutting fresh lines into the soft, shining soil, you understand the quiet lesson of this endless journey, that rest is not the absence of motion, but its companion. That safety is not found in walls, but in trust. And that every night survived, every dawn greeted, was a small, silent victory against the wild. The trail stretches ahead, glimmering faintly under the morning sun, bending towards somewhere you cannot yet see. You take one last deep breath, tasting the sweetness of the air, and then you follow. The Oregon sky opens above you, vast and forgiving. The land hums softly beneath your boots. And as you walk, you know, this is what it meant to sleep safely on the Oregon Trail. The years drift away like dust over the prairie, and the sound of wagon wheels fades into the deep hush of time. But sometimes, when the wind moves across the open plains just right, you can almost hear them again, the low creak of wood, the murmur of tired voices, the laughter of children chasing the last light before nightfall. The Oregon Trail is quiet now. Grass has swallowed its ruts, Rivers have changed their paths, and the campfires that once dotted these valleys have long since cooled into the soil. Yet their warmth lingers. Every dawn that breaks over this land still carries the faint echo of those who once rose here, brushed the dew from their blankets, and looked west with weary eyes full of faith. It is strange to think that sleep, something so simple, so taken for granted, was once an act of bravery. To lie down in a place without walls, with storms above and predators beyond, and still trust the world enough to close your eyes, that was courage. That was belief in something larger than fear. Many of them never made it to Oregon. Illness, storms, hunger, accidents. The trail took as much as it gave. But for every life it claimed, it also carried 1,000 quiet moments like this one. A fire's glow against the wind, a mother's song in the dark, a child's small hand clutching a corner of canvas for safety. Moments that spoke not of conquest but of endurance, the gentler side of survival. You imagine them now, scattered across memory's horizon, families sleeping in circles of wagons, their breath mingling with the cold night air, men on watch tracing constellations to measure the hours, dogs stirring, oxen sighing, the stars keeping vigil above it all. The vast American wilderness cradling fragile humanity, not as an enemy but as a teacher. And though the trail has vanished, its spirit remains, not in the ground, but in the way people still rise after hardship, still light fires against the wind, still trust the dark to hold them until morning. So tonight, as you lie in your own bed, far from the dust and danger of that journey, listen to the silence between heartbeats. Feel the stillness settle around you like the prairie night. And remember them, the ones who learned to rest even when the world was wild and uncertain. Because every quiet breath you take, every hour of safe sleep, is an inheritance from those who came before you, who taught the world that even on the edge of the unknown, peace could still be found under the same endless sky. And as your eyelids grow heavy, and the noise of the day fades, imagine a line of wagons rolling west beneath the stars, lanterns flickering, wheels whispering through the grass, and know that somewhere out there in the vastness, they are still traveling, still dreaming, still finding rest in the arms of the night.